to our panel discussion on transforming viewer experience through technology. Let me first introduce you to our moderator, Mr. Ali Hussain, Chief Executive Officer at Eros Now. For the panelists, we have Shabir Momin, MD and CTO Zenga TV and One Digital Entertainment, Nikhil Rangta, Indian Country Manager, Verizon Media, Shabuddin Sheikh, Chief Technology Officer, Alt Balaji, Shrikant Karnataka, Country Head for Microsoft Azure and Server Business at Microsoft Corporation India. I will request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the panel will address selected questions at the end of the session. Over to you, Mr. Hussain.
Thank you. Thank you, IMAI, for hosting a fabulous session of Pixels. The various facets of the larger media video business and our learnings through the day have been fabulous. I get the pleasure of being on the other side of the camera for once and actually asking the questions. So I'm excited about that opportunity. Today we have a very fantastic slew of colleagues with us, all from diverse backgrounds, but all contributing to the larger media tech and video tech economy. And I'm just going to keep coming back to the topic at hand is how does technology kind of transform the viewer experience, the media experience in general. We're going to do things slightly differently to start with. I'm going to request each of the colleagues to kind of introduce themselves and not talk about what they do in terms of what their role is, but about a passion point of why, like personally, they enjoy the business of media technology or video technology. I'm going to request Shabir Bhai to start, and then we can pass on to Nikhil and Shrikant and then Shabuddin from there on. Shabir Bhai, over to you.
Yeah. Shabir on mute.
Shabir Bhai, be on mute.
Yeah. Hi, thanks, Ali Bhai. Hi, everybody. I'm forever a CTO first and entrepreneur later, or a business guy later, or a role playing later. So we started from a technology innovation point of view in 2008-9. We cracked the code of being able to stream at 2.5G network at as low as 20 kbps of bitrate. We were very excited, and then we added live video ad streaming with in-video advertisements in 2008-9, which was very unique. While the whole world was doing subscription, we did paid ad-driven model. And then finally, we got into a stage where today we've come 15, 20 years, 18 years later into AR, VR, 360 experienced. The way the production is happening also is changing using technology. From the old age era of green screen markers and those kind of productions to using AR, VR augmentations and augmented reality content, 3D holographic content, and so many different aspects. So I think the whole system, I mean, if you look at how the automobile industry race car changed from just racing the cars to now fully technology driven racing in Formula One, I think the media industry is also the same thing. Every different elements of the whole life cycle of media business has now been uplifted by technology, and every single small player also contributes significant change in the experience, in how you deal with it, how do you manage. I think it's fantastic, and I think we are some of the lucky guys who are going through this transitional change in an era which I think the next generation might not see. They just see the end results, they won't see the process of going through it.
Thank you, Shabir Bhai. Nikhil, what according to you is your passion point of the business rather than your job profile?
I think, in fact, that was an interesting way to, introduce oneself. And I just felt that the love affair with video probably goes back many, many years. It starts from the black and white television to color, to then a VCR called something. As Shabir was saying, there are a lot of people who will not even know what a VCR means, a video cassette recorder, to CDs, DVDs, and then streaming and whatnot. And we don't even know where it will land finally. So I think that love affair has been there. And more so, I think technology has just been an enabler that you have kept pace with. It's always been the content. I remember as a kid watching like Tamil, Telugu, Bengali, all sorts of movies. It was just the love of content. And I think the love of content and technology came together almost exactly a decade back with YouTube. That was like first time I was in a place at Google where these two things came together. And and it just created magic. And from there on, I think I've been just following that trail, and it's been a very, very interesting journey. So yeah, I think for me, one of the things I was thinking about today is that there are companies, which are technology companies, which are into media and content and media and entertainment. But there are companies who are actually media and entertainment companies who are into or using technology now. So I feel it's the most of the Western world, like your, Netflix and Amazon, is more like the tech companies getting into media, whereas most of India, it seems like the media companies who are now adopting technology. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion today. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Nikhil. Shrikant, do you want to tell us?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic way of introducing, and thanks, Eddie, for bringing us all together with Lens. So, when it comes to my passion, literally, at least from a tech perspective, has been that India as a country provides a fantastic, what I would say, ground in terms of use cases, scenarios, demographics, especially when it comes to media content and other plays, where we can innovate for India, but literally take this innovation outside of India. And that's been a little bit of a platform passion that I have sensed. We are seeing that happen across multiple industries. And I'm pretty sure that media entertainment industry, given the foray, given a penchant for consuming content in very diverse formats across different categories, and obviously a ton of innovation at the right economics. So dynamic dubbing, as we were just discussing earlier. I mean, those kind of concepts will only evolve with such a wide demographic that India offers to us. And that platitude, I think, has to extend beyond our geographies. And I truly believe the time is now. That's actually happening. And I'm really excited that I'm living to see this day where whatever we were thinking of about a decade back is becoming so real. And I mean, that drives the energy, that drives the passion to go and make a bigger impact here.
Thank you, Shrikant. I've made a note to myself, right? The beauty about technology is that you identify a vision, you start the development process, and by the time you develop the project, the kind of consumer expectation is moved forward. So I've made a note to myself to ask you that question down the line. But I'm going to allow Shahabuddin to kind of talk about his technology personal passion and how it kinds of drives his inputs from a business standpoint.
Thank you, Ali. So, hi guys. My passion mostly is in solving problems, be of it any kind, especially when it comes to technology, right from the old days of MS environment where I come from, then a decade of work with mobile value-added services. That time it was consent gateway, or like subscription engines and auto renewals. That was a problem at that point of time. And apparently now trying to stream the videos in the low content connectivity area, which is again a good challenge to solve. So I think my passion drives me mostly basis of problem statements which you have in play and try to solve that.
Perfect. So I know each one of you guys would probably have this kind of conundrum of whether to do a hard sell of your product and your brand. So I figured it'll be a good idea to kind of get that out of the way first. So in kind of the next round, I've kind of drafted a set of questions that is specific to the business or the line of work that you contribute in from an overall tech ecosystem, right? Just to get a little bit of kind of vision, direction, insights into how you kind of contributing to the growth of the media tech, video, OTT ecosystem. So I'm going to quickly start with Nikhil. Nikhil, Verizon historically is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a telco within the US market, right? And that business kind of natively got into the overall kind of video, CDN, cloud, or the larger tech businesses. My question to you is, quality of video delivery is an important facet in the overall kind of user experience and satisfaction. So share with us in terms of the larger organization goals of what is it that you guys are doing or innovating from, say, 2023 onwards and kind of working backwards of how you would contribute or be better than the incumbents in your space.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm part of Verizon Media, which is essentially a group which was formed by Verizon in the last 5 years, where they got all the original consumer internet companies, AOL, Yahoo, TechCrunch, and a bunch of others. And we have some very interesting stuff that we have over the last few years put together. especially to your point, I think one of our biggest play is around 5G. So as we go in, like in India, we are on the verge of getting into 5G, probably 12 months to 18 months down the line. But in US, that's a reality, and some other parts of the world, it's a reality, and that's changing the user experience totally. Like for example, recently Super Bowl, etc., get over, and there are a bunch of activity that we were doing in partnership with a lot of the franchisees, stadiums out there, where the user experience, because many of them could not visit stadiums today, so it was a much more immersive experience that they were now getting through our technology. And and things like what we used to hear 2 years back, like AR, VR, I'm sure they will come up at some point in time. Now they are becoming a reality. See, I honestly used to feel 2, 3 years back that these are buzzwords and they're going to just die. But I guess today I stand corrected because of all of these new technologies, especially 5G coming in. All of this is now becoming a reality. And in fact, for us, I think the biggest thing is the user is going beyond engagement. User is demanding how it can be much more interactive, much more immersive. So that's the play that we have put together for ourselves, wherein I think we are almost leading from the front there, and we are banking on some of these, cutting edge stuff that we are working on now. Whether it is around video, whether it is around streaming, we are forming a quite a deep backbone there.
Got it. So if I was to understand that, Nikhil, slightly better, your entire kind of larger aspiration as a business is to continue investing forward based on evolutionary tech and obviously improving the experiences in Leo. I just want to do a follow-up before we kind of get into the other questions. Like, is there specific areas that you believe that other markets in the world would be different from India? There's specific nuances of how the tech stack kind of rolls out, looking at obviously the geo-specific preferences of like a US market versus a more developed market versus a developing market.
Yeah, like, for example, I think US is still pretty much driven by a desktop. Whereas as soon as you move towards emerging markets, a lot of our focus is on how we can do things mobile first. Because as we all know, all the next billion users are coming on phone. So that's a big, thing that we are focused on as a company to ensure. And then I think the next one is, which I think you guys are also innovating on, is looking at how one can solve problems of diverse languages, diverse genres, and how one can, so technology probably will play a role there as well. So, and finally, I would say ad tech. So we are extremely strong from we are talking about consumer as of now, but we are also strong at the monetization part of it. So we've built a full stack, whether it's a DSP, SSP, or a native platform, because you'll eventually want to monetize as well. So we bring in that piece as well. So our focus is in some of these areas.
Perfect. I'm going to pivot to Shrikant quickly. Shrikant, Microsoft is amongst a few companies reasonably early kind of investing in kind of local engineering talent in India specifically, right? So when you talk about some of the Microsoft big bets, right, in terms of how you guys segregate what projects are done in the West versus in India, what are those specific projects? Is there something specific in the space of OTT media tech that currently you guys are working on? And do you believe, so there is three questions, and then do you believe that we'll actually be able to see high quality innovation go from east to west?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for that, Ali. I really believe that, and that's also one of the fundamental beliefs across our leadership team as well. That innovation pocket, specifically India. I mean, if you look at India demographic profile, we basically are. If you were to, dissect it at three levels, you have an Africa profile here. You have a Mexico, which is pretty much in a different GDP zone to a Philippines. These are very different economies, very different characteristics. But when you look at India, you literally have the demographics of all these three countries here from a consumer lens. So that gives you a very rich playground to be able to then say, hey, what kind of tech that is very relevant for India. It's not about bringing tech that's been relevant for a US or a UK or some of these other markets and then saying, how do we force fit into an Indian context, as Nikhil was just outlining, in a mobile first world. The kind of challenges that you were to solve for literally are sort of unique as well from a content perspective. And and I'll outline why we believe that's important. For example, there are three things that literally India puts forward in pretty much all use cases, right? One is the demographic profile, multilingual language barriers that we need to evolve, especially across content. So whether it's Tamil, Telugu, all the way to Bengali, while the ethos is pretty similar, there is so much innate, I would say, demand or latent demand to be able to consume, understand the other side of the culture and be able to absorb. And I think we are fabrically well connected from an overall culture sense around content. So it's just about breaking language barriers, and I think tech has a very big role to play there. The second one is the economics part of this, and this is an important one. No other place in the world tests unit economics, costs, and that whole value at that particular cost point as much India tests. So if you're able to solve for that, literally we have seen in other industries, let's say clean energy, fintech, you go healthcare, like if you really solve for that, that unit economics has such a huge resonance for many other markets. So economics is the other big challenge and test condition that we have to pass in India very well. So that's the second one. And the third one, which is about scale. And when I say scale, it's not your standard media users where an Olympics happen and then about 200 or 300 million users log into the system. Here, a cricket match happens and you have hundreds of millions of users getting into, whether it's on a TV or a phone, and that's the kind of scale that we're talking about, and that's going to be consistent. So now when you start combining all these three variables, like the demographics, the language, the profile that India offers, the economics, and then of course the scale that sort of comes with it, every bit of tech, whether it's related to media entertainment or even outside, I do believe this is the best playground. And that's the principle behind us innovating from India. That's why Microsoft's strong belief has been that we got to solve for these use cases, not with a force-fit intent, but really deeply understand. It takes time. It takes partnerships like what we've been able to drive with companies like Eros and many others in this market to be able to really come to the play and say, okay, how do we innovate that? So from that lens, I think is just fantastic. We are here, we are in this generation trying to solve for these use cases, and I'll run through many of them. One of them that has literally stuck with us, especially in the media spaces, edge content and language barriers. I think language you touched upon, how AI can take over to literally look at a movie, translate it without any human intervention, and then provide that same movie in a different language in almost in a matter of a day, if not like few days where dubbing artists come and then sort of work towards it. Like what can AI do to solve for a use case? Second very interesting example is edge use cases. Now, this I believe is going to become even more prominent. What I believe by edge is pretty much large part of India which is still looking to exchange content, but may not have to download big movies on a 5G because it's still cost prohibitive to be able to do like 10 movie downloads or those kind of pipes and connections. So people are looking at for some better alternatives where content exchange can happen at the edge, where content providers, media aggregators, and of course, people who are in the ad industry can all benefit from that exchange. And how does it happen? Where tech plays a more pervasive role. This is a use case that we are literally going after fairly deep, and I think in a matter of a few months we'll see how that innovation will sort of come towards. I love to partner. But here we are not innovating for India only. Now, if you look at that edge use case, it has massive global implications beyond media. There are many scenarios where people may not have the kind of high scale, connectivity, but still want to be able to consume content, media, education services, many of those other services that edge use cases come to life. And India is the best test ground, or I would call the crucible, where all these experiments can happen in a scalable way, where all the three factors that I outlined get tested to the hilt, and then you have something robust enough to literally take the innovation made for India, but take it from India to many other parts of the globe. So that's what we are after at Microsoft.
Perfect, Shrikant. No, there's a very good examples of some of the product areas where I don't think some of the larger companies are focused in the West, but you're solving geo-specific problems. So I think there is some inspirational use cases there, and I guess the aspiration is always that we're able to create larger consumer bases around these use cases to make it more profitable for all stakeholders concerned. Shabuddin, the next question is to you. Um, I'm going to ask this question specifically in terms of, trying to categorize the kind of market audience that all tries to cater to, right? So a technology platform essentially to some extent is defined and is similar to what a Netflix or a Prime Video or, an Eros Now or a Hotstar might use. But when all things about the kind of target market, do you think that any aspect of the technology is going to be different in terms of the consumers you're going after? So how do you curate your back end or front end or entire kind of tech user experience based on the specific demographic of the audience are you targeting? So anything you'd like to share specifically there?
Definitely, Ali. So first of all, the kind of target audience we are catering. So nowadays, with the given scenario of pandemic, where we have seen the good user base which has come in last 1 year, mostly from tier 3 and tier 4 cities. And being at all the kind of audiences we get, they're more engaged, and the average consumption is almost in 2 digits in number of hours, which we see in the our systems. Now, coming back to your question of technologically how we are trying to solve the problems. First is we are try to transmit in SD and deliver in HD. So using some latest technologies, we are trying to improve the user experience where people are still able to have a good user, viewing experience, even though they are in a not very good media dark areas, like I would say tier 3 and tier 4 cities. So that is one aspect to it. Second is again, I would say it's more of hyper personalization where we have content, but how do we improvise our content, make the metadata rich? So it is totally not technology driven, but a part of it can be through technology where you can enrich your metadata by various AI tools and utilities so that you can propose or display the right set of content to the right audience at the right time. I think giving a mix of both programming and a last mile delivery is what we are looking at in terms of platform, enhancements.
Got it. But I'm just saying, how does this differ, Shabuddin? So, for example, like, we're at the early days of the OTT business, right? But once maturity happens, the audience base, and I know recommendation layers will be, say, geo-specific to your customer cohorts. Last mile delivery plays a very interesting role because we still have so-called patchy networks kind of jumping between 2G, 2.5G, 3G, before Nikhil's reality of 5G becomes more real, I would say. So do you see any core part of the overall stack being different about how you serve a consumer base in a metro and a non-metro? Or do you think that the core architecture and the backend remains similar with tweaks only happening on certain facets?
I think the core architecture obviously remains the same, but again, sorry, last sentence.
No, we
Saying
can.
something?
So I'm saying that is there some core part of the overall stack that will be different, or the core stack remains similar? I'm just
The
kind
core
of getting
remains the same.
Okay, understood. Understood. Sharibhai, I'm going to ask you, you wear two very interesting hats. One is a co-founder hat, which is second, and a CTO hat, that's first. So, right, the rumor is apparently there are the car engines that are being used in a Volkswagen now are not very different from the ones being used in an Audi, right? So we always get this question now, that our business of OTT is a business of content. If you make great content, people will subscribe to the service. Now, if you were to create one specific statement against that, of saying that, as a technology, passion, human individual, how would you say that that statement is, I won't say completely untrue, but not 100% true?
Let me give you an analogy, really. I am also a strong believer of content is king. There's no doubt. But in this whole analogy of, let's say, automobile and engine, the content is the fuel, it's the gas, which will keep coming and keep running. I mean, you put high octane gas, you will run faster. You put a nitro booster, you will go even faster. If you put a kerosene, it will go slower. If you try CNG, it's economic, but it's cheap. So that's how the grades of oils are different, right? There's no difference. So if you get a great content, amazing movie, Three Idiot, Amir Khan, it will cost you a lot because it's nitro. But it will give you the engagement. It will give you the spike. It will give you the all of that. But if you get a 36 Chinatown, which is less watched, stayed on the theater for maybe a week, you might get it for 500 rupees movie, but it will also not give you as much. But it's good, it is important because there are some times in the journey that you will need to get that speed, and there are some times in journey that you will need to just cover the ground, right? You need to go the distance. So you need the all kind of fuel. So there are filler fuels that you need to just cover the ground, keep the people engaged, and obviously you can't have very high class content all the time, because then you are the high class of today will become the base of tomorrow. I mean, look at what Netflix has done. I mean, significant percentage of Netflix content is good, which is why you kind of get spoiled with the choice, and now you are craving for even better. So that's so you're making the octane of yesterday, or the nitro of yesterday, become the octane of tomorrow. That's what is happening. But having said all of that, the engine still remains the same, right? It's now the question of whether you have a V8 engine or a V6 engine. And that's where the technology, the power, the nuts and bolts, all of that comes. Not clearly saying that the technology is superior than content, but I think we are at a cusp where content used to be the king and it will remain the fuel, but technology will supersede the experience. So imagine same content in a VR experience. Imagine the same content in a augmented reality experience, in an immersive experience, in a touch and feel experience. And when that comes in, you will not want to watch the cricket match sitting in a stadium, which is considered the best way of watching. You would want to watch it at home, but in an augmented reality theater or a VR theater, because you can go next to Sachin and watch him play right next to him, and also come back and watch from the stadium, or go to the commentary box and watch it. Imagine how many different things you'll be able to do. When we were doing an experimental thing with the Himalayan rallies, that we wanted to do a 56 camera setup, including drone cameras, which will follow the whole Himalayan rally from different angles. People, I mean, none of us would have, I think most of us would not have seen Himalayan rally in person, maybe seen the flagging off of Himalayan rally on TV as a news, and flagging and the closing cycle. But the real fun is the part in between, which nobody else usually sees because of proximity, problem, hill, network, every other thing. But imagine if you can do that, the experience is so different. I think the technology is going to take us to that level of experience and when it comes to technologies like Nikhil's technology, they are useful for everything, not just media. And we are talking media just from entertainment point of view. Media is required now for education. Media is required for conducting classes. Media is required for explaining theories of technology. I mean, now students are being taught animal anatomy through augmented reality and VR experience immersively put together. So you can rip apart a bone and show what's happening, what's not. That's where I think it's moving, and the blend of media into technology and all these put together, it's going to be a very different world in the next 5 years. And the speed of change is extremely fast. So you will see so many new things in the next 5 years, which we have not seen in the last 50 years, maybe.
No, I'm completely confident of that. In fact, that will actually allow me a fantastic segue into a very tricky aspect, right? You mentioned two interesting things. One was the fact is that with immersive, life's going to change. Media use cases kind of cut across education, banking, would be cutting across several industry segments, right? But just for sake of today's discussion, we're just keeping media or video kind of at the core. And just an interesting factoid is that around close to 60 to 70% of data consumption in the world is actually done through video and gaming. I'm going to say that because we've got Microsoft in the room and they're close to gaming. So I'm just going to keep that also wide. But the point that I'm actually getting to, right, at the steady state, at the current state, do you think the technology is commoditized? This question's for every one of you, and I'm going to just request somebody to start first. But just to explain further, you've got a certain payment system, you've got a certain architecture of a backend, you've got cloud, you've got CDN. There are certain checkboxes, right? If somebody develops a engine, that engine can be fit into any design. So I'm just saying, is technology commoditized to the extent in a steady state today that every service is just nuanced and slightly different from one another? We understand that the future evolution and the innovation would come in with immersive and lots of other use cases. But are we differentiating or innovating at the product level, right from a Netflix to the smallest incumbent in India that's actually launching a technology platform? Or is it 90% consistent? I'm going to start with you, Shabir Bhai, just because you left off the discussion saying that the engine is slightly different, but the same for the most part, and then we'll go to everywhere else.
There are so let me explain it to you in a different way that there are two kinds of organizations that operate in this world. I mean, there are these giants, and the giants are called giants because they dared to do a full life cycle of business, which means they not only created the components, they also created the pipe, they also created the supply chain, they also created the distribution, and they are also finding the customers and giving them the best experience. So they did the whole life cycle. So somebody like a Microsoft, somebody like an Amazon AWS, somebody like Verizon, what they are doing is they were originally just pipes or just box sellers. Now what they did was, how do they make their pipe interesting? So they bought in a lot of products, a lot of companies, they acquired them, they created, they spiced up the whole thing. They went to the end customer and saw what are the real needs and bought all the elements that are required and put it in one box and gave it as a solution. So don't worry about it, just focus on your core and leave the rest to us. That leave the rest to us is becoming bigger and bigger. And pretty much like you just find the name of the company and we'll do the rest for you. Find the concept and we'll do the rest for you. I mean, it's almost getting to that level. Now, that is one part. But what is happening is that is usually the number of organizations in that spot is very small, maybe 1 or 2% of the world from even the larger cycle point of view. The smaller innovators are creating technologies which are going into these marketplaces, Azure Marketplace, Verizon Marketplace, Amazon Marketplace, where technology is commoditized and put as a service, as a solution. And you just pick and drop things and you put it into a box and you make your magic. The choice of making the magic is yours. You will get support from these guys to make better magic if you need to. And
So,
that is
sorry, I'm going to jump in.
innovation in
Sorry,
today's
Shabir Bhai.
solution is much better.
Sorry, Shabir, I'm going to jump in. So you're basically saying that the products are ready, the architect plays a larger role than the developer.
Yes.
Okay.
The innovation is not anymore in the core tech because there is one breed of generation which is only making the core techs and marrying it into these marketplaces to make it available to larger. I mean, Play Store is one example, right? You make one app, you put it in the Play Store, millions of people consume it. But you can also make a component of that one solution and give it in the marketplace now. And somebody like me or somebody like you could come and just create an idea. And when I draw an idea, I realize that, okay, I need a streaming engine, I need a storage, I need a encoding engine, I need a transmission, I need an immersive experience, I need a 3D. So I just pull in all these resources, put it into one box, stitch it nicely. How I stitch it and what UX do I do is the only contribution that I do. And how well do I do it is what makes the win or lose.
Perfect. I'm going to pause here, and this is a very interesting point. I'm going to flip because you've spoken as the architect at the back end, where you're basically doing the stitching. I'm actually going to pivot to Shabuddin and ask you that with this ecosystem, with so-called open source plug and play kind of ecosystem, with a lot of products that are available, some free and some at a significantly incremental cost, how do you differentiate on the product or technology, or is there a need to differentiate on the product and technology? Because I'm saying for the sake of this discussion, you're representing alt, not the CTO of alt, but you're representing alt, and you think consumer first, right? So making that assumption, my question to you is that if everything is relatively simple, is there an opportunity that all gets to differentiate to the customer from a backend or a tech standpoint?
Sure. So Ali, especially coming from the basic question of yours, open source versus paid application or technologies. So it's mostly driven by the need. What do you want to do with the users, or as a upbringing of a new solution you want to cater to your users? Especially coming to how do we identify or target our users? See, in alt, our segments are very clearly defined. What we are working towards is, providing a better user experience. Now, for that, we are leveraging different set of technologies, and that could be like right from single sign-on, easing the registration, and improving the initial sampling of the content and programming of the content.
Understood. So the interpretation, again, if I was to kind of just summarize that, you're saying essentially the tech stack's fairly commoditized. It's about how you create your journeys and how do you create less consumer friction is genuinely the differentiation. And hence a lot more technology innovations happening on the middleware cycle rather than at the front end cycle. Is that an accurate representation of what you
To
just said?
some extent true, because even at the representation layer, especially the UX, while we definitely keep the users at the center of the journey, we try to keep the experience very frictionless because we are a SWOT platform. Users hardly are done the hard effort of searching the content, clicked on the content, is now agreeing to pay and watch the content. So it has to be frictionless and as easy as simple for the user to click, pay, and go through and
Got
watch
it.
the content.
Shrikant, over to you. Is content king? What does that mean to you?
Definitely, I mean, Shabir bhai really outlined it well. I do believe content is very, very central. At the same time, like instead of who leads what, I do think like it is tech or is it content. I definitely think it is a very synergistic play between. They have to complement each other. I'll give a simple example. Even with Netflix, with some amazing content that you would have, one of the challenges when I'm as a user sort of get in is just figuring out the right kind of content for my own play. Of course, there are good recommendation engines; they're getting better, but still navigating through a flurry of this and making it consumer first. So now that's where the tech comes. You might have amazing content, but just from a use case scenario and something making it far more easier for me to be able to naturally gravitate to something that I may like. It could be in a very different genre or a different language altogether. I still believe a lot of that play has not been solved. It is still getting solved. Now, that's where that middleware, like that innovation of the tech pieces, I feel is going to help a lot. Where a combination of how we look at the data, what are those signals that consumers really like, understand their moods, propensities around what they would like to watch around different times. Like you literally gravitate from a sports movie to suddenly a theatrical stuff which is pretty historical. Like it's a pretty big transition. Like how do people make that? That's a very different thing to be able to solve at an AI layer, which is constantly understanding your moods and then being able to bring that. I think those nuances still have not been solved. And if you are able to solve for that, your core differentiation starts coming there. Like you are even more drawn into immersive platform before we even look at higher levels of immersion, which is AR, augmented reality, and VR and all. So that's my take that these two wheels have to complement each other really well.
I have a follow-up question, Shrikant, to that. Sorry.
So Ali, if I can,
Yeah,
sorry,
please, Nikhil, go ahead.
I just, my mind was racing towards a slightly counterpoint. So I thought, let me just bring that up
Please do.
in the spirit of a little bit of a debate. So I do feel that, content to me, technology to me, definitely is extremely important. But at the same time, it is also becoming hygiene. Anybody, Netflix, Amazon comes up with something, everybody else seems to figure out a way of reaching there. But for me, I think what I was thinking is content, and I'm taking sides here. I'm not saying one is more important than the other. I'm taking sides here and saying content is king. And why I say that, if the latest award-winning, Oscar-winning movies come out now, it is not available on OTT, and when you want to watch it, you want to watch it. Do you care about the quality, the streaming, the technology, or anything as a user? What you care about is the content. And you will figure out a way of watching it, whether rightly or wrongly. So I just feel if you come from a consumer point of view, technology to me, the best technology is which is invisible. The user doesn't even realize that some amazing work has been done below the hood. So that's what my feeling is, and sooner or later different players in the industry do catch up on technology. Beyond a point, it does start to become that, okay, if somebody's made an innovation, people will reach there, but content is something I feel will always remain. Maybe that from Octane to Nitro to whatever else. I love the analogy that Shabir Bhai gave. I think that was just amazing. So yeah, I'm just putting a stake in the ground and saying my feeling is towards content.
No, Nikhil, that's the spirit of the question, right? Like it's almost like we have this debate every discussion I've had, that what's the role that, content is king and technology is question mark, right? So, and in a discussion on video OTT specifically, when we talk about tech, what I'm trying to get to, and I'm going to pose this question to you, and potentially maybe Srikanth, you can jump in after this, right? Is we talk innovation very loosely. We've talked about language innovation. I can almost be certain in the fact that you don't know the impact of innovation or what it will drive in terms of uptake, either in consumption or in engagement or in economics. How do you measure? Because you can only measure post implementation, right? Researches are fabulous, dipstick studies are fabulous, but you get an estimation of what it potentially can do. But the real effect of technology is the actual implementation of technology in so-called a pilot or alpha or beta, keeping the context of the session in mind, right? So how do you look at innovation when you have made some hypotheses based on whatever facts, right? That this is going to create an impact of an X percentage, either in viewership or in engagement or in economics. So Nikhil, I'm going to start with you. Um, how do you, what would be the advice that you would give? You've been around the business for a long time. You've got fabulous experience through various companies and looking at it lens or different lens in terms of scale also. So what do you think would be your suggestion to the audience when they look about services innovations? Because let's assume that you're saying for the most part the stack is commoditized, right? When you look at services innovations in terms of value-added services, right? And I'm classifying that generally across a lot of value-added services. What would be your advice to companies like yourself or startup companies that look at what is the impact you're trying to create and assess before you actually start investing in that innovation?
I think two things there. One is, while it's absolutely everything starts with a hypothesis, and that's where I think you start building things. So one of the things, most popular keyword that I've heard in the last 10 years is MVP, a minimum viable product. So any technology that you try to figure out, you try and see if there is a way of doing iterations. And I'm sure each one on the panel today has in some ways or the other, because technology implementation is very expensive. It's not only people, there are a lot of things which are at stake, and there are stakeholders to convince. So I think that's one of the things that you do. It's also, I think, what, at least in my experience in some of my companies, what we've been also applying is a lot of design thinking in terms of trying to figure out creating prototypes and trying to test it with real users to get that measurement going that Ali you're talking about. Because only then you start becoming confident that you can put more money, more resources, more effort behind it. Because otherwise it might be just like burning away stuff without really knowing where you're getting to. Because today you have to keep account of every penny that you spend. So yeah, I think it is an iterative process, especially when it comes to technology and implementation, and that's the point of view that at least we tend to have.
Shrikant? What is your, Shrikant, you might be on mute. I'm just saying, what's your kind of, you guys are doing a lot of R&D. When you guys put stuff out in the market, what's your kind of benchmarking that you guys do in terms of a new implementation of sorts needs to have a certain KPI metrics of what it should ideally achieve, right? So anything on language or anything on so-called, last mile delivery, all the projects that you guys are currently working on, what do you define as a benchmark of success? How do you define that? What's the qualitative, quantitative metrics?
Sure. So one of the easiest ones that most of us gravitate towards is saying, hey, what's the revenue impact and like how are we opening up a new market? Because any tech that goes through, okay, let's look at time. I mean, these are your standard measures. But beyond all of this, one of the things I think we are getting very grounded around, getting a lot more humble around the fact is these are probably not the right metrics. Like of course there is a massive opportunity, TAM, revenue, and all. Adoption is and usage is the god of all metrics. Like literally nothing beats it. We worry only about that and start seeing that. And I think some of these early signals for the examples I was sharing around language, AI-based plays, or whether it's edge or last mile delivery of content in a place where there is very little network connectivity, or rather network connectivity isn't the most economically sound way to transfer content. There are some of these examples, and I think the number one thing that we are almost pivoting ourselves every time is just around what's the customer usage adoption, and are they embracing this? Because if you're able to solve that problem, most of the other metrics, outcomes, KPIs, they start following that.
But Shrikant, the question here is that what is the anticipation, right? Let's say that you're recommending a particular change. Is there like you're looking at, say, if I'm doing 100 views or 100 minutes of time spent, do you look at that jumping up to 110, 115? I'm just trying to get specific here, right?
Yeah,
Is there an incremental objective that you set out for yourself that what defines as a successful use case? I'm saying my question is actually how do you define that successful use case?
Yeah, so typically, at least in some of the product, bigger platforms that we are after, a good threshold that we generally end up in terms of adoption is 1 million users as they get to the first node. I mean, that's our first, I would say, first sense of we are in the right direction. And that 1 million users over a period of 1 month, 3 months, doesn't matter. But that tells us also the delta in terms of what's the adoption cycle getting in. But after that first 1 million users is where we definitely start looking at a very big scale. So then it's not a linear jump that we are looking at. Then you're basically going after 20, 30 odd million users eventually to start making reasonable sense. But pretty much that's how we start looking at adoption.
Fantastic. Sharma, a very interesting question to you. I've spoken to a lot of people in this business from across the world, right? A lot of people that are invested in different areas of the spectrum. A lot of brands that exist in this space, one of the challenges that they face is solving for discovery. Each of us have maybe are potentially early adopters on Netflix when it first came to India. And I can almost guarantee we must have spent 20, 30 minutes kind of ending our next show after we watched our first show, right? So how is it that we as an ecosystem, and I'm limiting our ecosystem to India for right now, are solving for discovery? What do you think that we should be doing better? Because there is a significant invest in customer acquisition, there's a significant investment in consumer retention, right? Now, if you're able to kind of create these cohorts and pivots and ensure that we're able to solve for discovery a lot better, it would kind of reduce the friction on both sides of the spectrum. So what is your assessment of what's happening today and how do we improve it tomorrow? Shabibhai, you're on mute.
So there is a change that will come. I think we are still waiting, and we are waiting for the first mover advantage there for people. This has happened in the newspaper industry, in the TV industry, and other industries in the past. Not yet in the OTT and original content space as yet. That changes. Remember, if you remember 10 years back, I don't like reading newspaper, or sometimes I might not have time reading a newspaper, but that does not mean that I should not be aware of what's happening. So there are agencies over there who will just send you a quick newsletter with links of the most important news as per your choice. If I don't care about sports, they will not send me sports. They will just send me economics, finance, technology, and other stuff, headlines. And when you move to the TV era, there were recommendation companies who would come and tell you, based on your needs, what are the kind of content available in which channel and when. Something like that is missing right now, and somebody will come up with that, I'm sure, very soon. Right now, the pirated industry is doing that job for us technically, because they only pirate good stuff. I mean, that has been very unique about pirated industry from the time pirated industry has been born. That if something is not found in the pirated industry on a pirated site, is not worth watching because they don't pirate bad.
Sorry, so you're giving me a chance to ask you a question. So you're asking that the pirators basically develop the next recommendation algorithm for potentially
themselves are the next recommendation guys by default, and they have been that for decades. I mean, if you look at, so for example, if you look at, was 36 Chinatowns DVD pirated and sold? No. So, which is why it has a different kind of a value from an archival content point of view. Was Sholay pirated? Yes, it was pirated from the time when it was launched first till now, and it is still being pirated. But the point is that there has to be a legitimate legal system or a legal application or a service that provides you, which curates unbiased content. Because if you ask today as to ZEE5 or a Ditto or a Hotstar or a Netflix, that curate your own content. It's almost like going to a restaurant and asking the butler, "Khane mein acha kya hai?" the first answer he always gives is "Sab kuch acha hai." So you don't want, because he will never say my dal is bad or my this is bad. So he will always say everything in my restaurant is good. So for that you have to ask for a reference to a customer. Here the customer is a third party who will curate all the content and tell you this is what you need to watch, and you just need to go and choose your genres and you will get it. And I
I
think
have a
that's the
feeling,
piece which will
sorry,
change the game.
I have a feeling every tech platform owner on the OTT side is going to hire a pirater in the data science team after this discussion because it's going to get inspired from biased choices versus unbiased choices, right?
And you will be surprised, pirates are usually very young kids in the range of 13 to 18. Because after that, they get into a job so by some way or the other.
So I was avoiding this question, but it's almost like, first it was millennials, but Gen Z, considering the audience profile in this room, at least on the panel, right? You're saying essentially Gen Z should be running the business, not people like us.
Yes, because we don't even understand what they're thinking. I mean, what my son wants to watch at the age of 8 is totally beyond me. I mean, I can't even imagine and relate to what he's watching and why.
Understood. Understood. Shamilan, I've got an interesting question for you. We don't have too much time left, and I want to get to one more kind of generic question for everybody. Just quickly you want to share with us because we see a lot of interesting evolution in the startup space in India, right? Also, the advantage with the startup ecosystem is the fact is they're not coming from inside out thinking, but they're coming from outside in thinking, right? So, looking at it from a consumer lens, looking at solving interesting problems. Any specific areas that Alt has kind of explored or working with startups or looking at a non-traditional solve or just engaging startups across the ecosystem, something that came across in the last few years, which you believe was interesting to share with the larger panel of how you'd like to kind of work with the startup ecosystem in general?
Sure. So earlier I tried to give a glimpse of, I'm not on mute, right?
Yeah.
So earlier I tried to give a glimpse of it, like, especially talking about the tier 3, tier 4 cities. So OTT is no longer an urban phenomena. Like we are getting users from tier 2, tier 3 cities, which are not very well connected. So we are trying to partner with startups. We have already partnered with a startup where we are trying to deliver in SD. And on the device side of it, we are trying to upgrade, do the pixel upgradation and display it in HD, which is somewhere bettering the user experience. So that is again one takeaway we have from again, it's learning from the users' feedback, where they are able to give us feedbacks in terms of buffering and other watching issues they have. So that is where one thing we have
Got
done.
it. So you're essentially saying that you're working with an existing startup to look at how you're able to kind of compress the package on delivery and expand the package on consumption. Is that a correct assessment of the?
To some extent, not totally. So it's on AI on the side of the client, on the device itself, we are trying to upgrade it.
Got it.
So compression
Understood.
is one side of it, but enhancing it on the client side is another side of it.
Got it. Got it. Got it. I have this very interesting question I'm going to ask each one of you. The answer expectation is to kind of give it in few words. Actually, it's not a sentence also if possible. The question actually is that if you were to crystal ball gaze the business of video tech, media tech in 2024, 2025, what are the 2, 3 things that you believe will be so-called evolutions from a technology contribution perspective in the larger video OTT business? And I'm caveating this, you're not allowed to say AR, VR. Nikhil, sorry, don't mean to put you on the spot first, but.
Sure. And since you've asked me to use words, I'm just thinking probably, I think this whole thing that all of us have been obsessing about, from attention to it will be all about intention. And I think engagement to immersion, if I could use 4 words.
Immersion is another word of AR/VR, but I'll take that answer. Fine. Srikanth.
Yeah, I mean, I won't be as eloquent as Nikhil, but I can definitely say esports convergence with OTT. That's bound to happen.
Let me decipher that. Esports, kind of, you're saying merger with OTT. So
Yeah.
esports is technically video, right?
It is literally you're gonna look at sports in a very different paradigm. And
No, I'm trying to interpret your answer. So is it the viewer becomes either the participator or the contributor?
so the viewer today has been the viewer, continues to, but they will get a lot more participative in these esports. And OTTs typically have to change the direction and the way they currently engage with this audience and even the audience itself once the esports convergence happens. So I think that's going to be the next next 4 or 5 years big play, whether esports gonna happen on big games or professional video games, whether it's like Fortnite or other things. But esports, the convergence with OTT, I think, is a pretty big shift in that industry.
Got it. Shabir bhai? You're on mute again.
Our favorite entertainment devices will evolve and change. I think we'll see a lot of 3D in our life, which is not there. We're still in 2D in most of the entertainment device, but the device will become more 3D enabled, both in the TV as well as in the handheld devices. The devices itself will change also. Like we've already seen a transition of a lot of things moving in from the phone to a watch, which is the smartwatch. But a lot of these things will also go into visuals now. It will become a part of your frame, or if you're, or your pair of sunglasses, or your glasses, or it will move in that direction. And I think it will not also be one device anymore. Your car will be a device, your phone will be a device, your handheld will be, your watch will be a device, your shoe will be a device, your shirt will be a device. I think in the next 4 or 5 years, you will be covered with different pieces of things which are dumb today, will become all smart and communicate with you differently.
So if I was to interpret that, you're basically saying you carry your hardware in your pocket, and essentially every gadget that you use essentially becomes a engagement device. Is that the correct interpretation?
Yeah, I mean, for example, 5 years later, when you're jogging, it's not your watch or your phone which will tell you how many steps, it's your shoe which will tell you how many steps and what pressure and how much temperature. Your shirt will tell you how much sweat you've sweated out and how much calories you've burned. Your
Shabir bhai, but
sunglasses.
where do we draw the, sorry, I just don't mean to jump in, but where do we draw the line, right? Because this is a dangerous business we've obviously seen in the world of news, and I know this is a longer discussion and we don't have enough time, but just like a quick line on where do we draw the line?
I think as long as companies are ethical in creating a personal loop, saying your personal data stays in this personal loop, I think everything is happy. But it is going to be the most difficult thing to achieve because everybody's greedy. They all want more, they want to know more about you. They want to peep into your house and see what you do, and then plan. In the name of trying to do better recommendation engine for you, they want to know everything about you first. It's like a doctor, right? Tell me your symptoms, then I'll tell you the treatment.
Got it. With this, I know the audience would have potentially loved a longer session on this topic. I intentionally kind of kept it out of the larger discussion because it's a generic, tricky space. But Shahabuddin, just quickly, I want to make sure you get your points in. Other than AR, VR, few words on what you believe innovation is going to be about.
So obviously, I like to some extent totally relate with Shabir bhai. So my answer would be it would be multi CDN, multi content, and multi devices. Because to
Multi-CDN, multi-devices, and
multiple content. Because what you
multiple
like to see on your watch, wouldn't you not what like to watch with your family TV? So you
Got
have
it.
to have.
We have a minute. I'm going to pose an audience question quickly just to make sure that we're able to get something in. There's a very interesting question that's come up. Will there be a time when normalcy restores? That actually we can't answer, but we'll try to attempt that. That viewers may switch from online content back to theaters. Will we be able to retain the viewership on OTT? Any quick thoughts there before we wrap up? Anybody?
I think people will go back to theaters. I mean, because every experience is different. I mean, there's no question about it. And that's why theaters have sustained in this market. We as Indians, we always love the stadium, love the theater, love that experience. Yes, but there has to be a significantly different experience made. So you have to bring the theater home to let go the theater. You will not let go the experience of a theater otherwise. I mean, I do not want to watch Spider-Man, Superman, or any of these amazing things without having an IMAX experience, all that. Right? So why would somebody let it go? Yes, people are craving. I mean, look at a small relaxation happened and everybody's in Goa or in Srinagar, right? These are the two places, hot and cold, where everybody is in. So theaters will do the same experience, I'm assuming.
I think it will also depend on
the OTT business though.
I also feel this, adding to Shabir's point, it will be which India we are talking about here. I think the UK of India versus the sub-Saharan Africa of India. Yeah, for some of them who can bring the theater home will be probably at the top of the pyramid, and whereas probably the most of India will still be looking at theaters and going and actually enjoying the movie.
Got it. So you're saying India will go back, certain parts of India might not, but India traditionally would go back. I think we're out of time. Are we?
Seems our host is frozen.
Yeah.
Oh, she's back.
Shivani Ali is asking, are we done or do we have more time?
I think she's struggling with the audio.
Thanks everyone. I think we're done with the session. Thank you everyone. Thank you
Thank
speakers
you all.
for this
Thank
very
you for a
engaging
fabulous
discussion.
session.
Thanks
Thank
a
you so
lot,
much, Ali.
everyone.
Thank you
Thank you.
everyone.
Really pleasure to see you again.
Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.